Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, they can drive a car, get a firearms licence, legally have sex. So why shouldn't 16-year-olds be able to vote? An historic court decision that's forced Parliament's hands and the teens that took it all the way to the top. We talk to a lawyer and a minister about what happens next. Golfer Lydia Ko aces it with one massive payday, $3.25 million if you're counting. Armed police surround a North Shore house after schools and kindies are locked down. And follow the fireball. We are off on a meteor hunt again. Don't forget you can watch us Freeview Channel 50 and Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. MPs will be given the opportunity to debate lowering the voting age to 16, but any change wouldn't take effect for the 2023 election. The Supreme Court has declared the voting age of 18 discriminatory and inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act. Any change, though, would require the backing of 3/4 of Parliament or a majority vote in a referendum. The Prime Minister says draft legislation will be drawn up so MPs across the House can have the debate.
I personally support a decrease in the voting age, but it is not a matter simply for me or even the government. Any change in electoral law of this nature requires 75% of parliamentarians' support.
Jacinda Ardern says the Speaker will decide whether it will be a conscience vote where MPs aren't bound to vote along party lines. The National Party says it's happy with the status quo on the voting age. Leader Christopher Luxon says he doesn't see a need for change. The ACT Party has vowed to fight any efforts to lower the age, with leader David Seymour saying the Supreme Court should stick to its knitting and quit the judicial activism. The Greens, however, support lowering it, with MP Golritz Garaman saying that would strengthen our democracy. A house remains cordoned off on Auckland's North Shore after armed police descended on a residential street this afternoon. Half of Lancaster Road on Beach Haven was blocked by more than 10 police vehicles, and one house was cordoned off for most of the afternoon. Residents say they had to leave their homes after hearing the police over a megaphone asking them to evacuate the area. They were allowed to return a short time ago, but the house at the centre of the call-out is still cordoned off. A Lancaster Road resident says police call-outs aren't uncommon in the area and he's not surprised by today's event.
It's a lot of gang activity, but in this street alone, no, we average just about 6, maybe, as I said, about 4 or 5 times a year up the street. No, we've been here, 2 years.
Lockdowns have now been lifted for 5 primary and intermediate schools on the North Shore. Police say the Beach Haven operation is linked to an earlier firearms incident in Huapai in West Auckland this morning. That resulted in a school and 2 kindergartens going into lockdown. Ngāti Wairere have filed a Treaty of Waitangi claim over a proposed housing project in Hamilton, saying they were never consulted despite strong historical ties to the site. The site is currently a car park but is built on top of Opoia Pā. The rangatira of the Pā, Poukawa, signed the Treaty of Waitangi. Ngāti Wairere historian Wiremu Puke says the council breached their treaty obligations by going ahead without consultation. He says the iwi would like to see a green space or a memorial honouring the Pā's connection to the treaty built on the site instead. An astronomy fan who caught a spectacular fireball on video just barely missed seeing the event in person. It flew over Northland last night, with scientists now looking for a meteorite that could have hit the ground. Logan Carpenter, an amateur astrophotographer, was watching the sky as the meteorite flew behind him.
I was actually imaging with my telescope at the time, but I had the telescope pointing in a different direction. My wife was just looking at the security cam the next day and said, "What's this light and glowing in the sky?" And I had a look at it and realised that the security camera had captured what looked like a fireball.
New Zealand astronomers have recovered only 9 meteorites in the last 150 years. And an event to celebrate the Black Ferns Rugby World Cup win will be held at Parliament on Tuesday, December the 13th. The Sports Minister, Grant Robertson, says the Black Ferns' triumph at Eden Park was one of New Zealand's greatest sporting moments, and the event will be a chance for New Zealand to meet, mingle and celebrate with the players. The government will partner with Wellington City Council and New Zealand Rugby to host the event. To other sports news, Lydia Ko has described 2022 as probably her most solid year on the LPGA Golf Tour. Ko's won the Player of the Year title for the second time with victory in the season-ending Tour Championship in Florida, her third tournament win of the year.
To be the Player of the Year and to win the Vera Trophy again and to win the CME Tour Group Tour Championship, it's a dream come true. And as much as I'm excited that I have won, I'm also excited for some time off and get ready to become a bride.
The victory earned Ko $10 million all up. Black Fern Ruahe Demont hopes her unexpected World 15's Player of the Year award inspires the next generation. Demant beat out 4 other contenders for the top prize, including the Black Ferns wing Portia Woodman.
I never knew about the Black Ferns growing up as a kid. Women's rugby was never accessible, was never something that you kind of aspired to be like because you never had role models like that to look up to. And that was one of the great things about this World Cup is people could see so many strong women out there doing amazing, incredible things.
Wayne Smith won Coach of the Year, while wing Ruby Tui was named Women's 15's Breakthrough Player of the Year. And the Black Caps captain, Kane Williamson, will miss the third T20 Cricket International against India in Napier tomorrow due to a medical appointment. Coach Gary Stead says the appointment has nothing to do with Williamson's historic elbow complaint and he'll rejoin the side for the one-day series. That's the news.
It's all about what you're worth, be it a Vice-Chancellor.
Each university makes its own decisions. These are huge jobs, being Vice-Chancellor, but people will make their own judgment on whether they think that amount of money is appropriate or not.
Or a GP. People aren't signing up to be GPs because there's no money in it, so you're in a kind of vicious cycle.
Exactly, when there are other alternatives such as the other specialties, which have seriously better conditions, but also Australia.
Value Added Morning Report, weekdays from 6 here on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Waikato, occasional rain, sometimes heavy, with possible thunderstorms in the afternoons and evenings. Northerly gales tomorrow evening in exposed places. From Waipomo to Wellington, also for the Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Occasional rain clearing this evening. Occasional rain with heavy falls and thunderstorms developing from tomorrow afternoon. Northerly gales tomorrow evening in exposed places. From Gisborne to Waididuppa, scattered rain clearing this evening, returning tomorrow afternoon and evening. Nelson and Marlborough, scattered rain this afternoon, a few showers tomorrow, turning to rain in the evening. Buller to Fiordland, periods of rain with heavy and possibly thundery falls. Canterbury, rain about the high country and a few spots further east. Otago and Southland, scattered rain, possibly heavy with thunderstorms this evening. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, occasional light rain, clearing tomorrow afternoon. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I will have traffic and news headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Coming up, Lydia Ko's $3 million payday, and we'll have the latest from Auckland's North Shore, where armed police have closed in on a house. But we begin tonight at Parliament, where all MPs will get to vote on whether 16-year-olds can go to the ballot box in the general election. In the past hour, the Prime Minister's announced the government will draft a new law lowering the voting age to 16 following a Supreme Court ruling today. In the historic decision, the court declared the voting age of 18 to be discriminatory to 16 and 17-year-olds. 16-year-olds are able to leave school, learn to drive, get a job and pay tax. The Make It 16 group argued 16 and 17-year-olds also make adult decisions, and preventing them from voting until 18 was unjustified age discrimination. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say.
Cabinet has resolved to draft a piece of legislation with a proposal to lower the age of voting for 16 for the whole of Parliament to consider. Now, I cannot tell you currently how any member of this House will vote on this proposed law, including Labour, as we have not met or discussed it as a caucus. What I can tell you is that this is a matter where I hope parties feel that they're able to have an open debate and discussion that isn't based on politics, but on their own values and principles.
Te Piramia Jacinda Ardern. Make It 16 took their case all the way to the country's top court after earlier losing bids both at the High Court and the Court of Appeal. Crystal Gibbons reports on the case that's forced Parliament's hand.
Inside a Wellington courtroom today, members of Make It 16 nervously awaited Justice Allan France's decision. Emotions running high as the Supreme Court agreed the current voting laws are breaching the Bill of Rights Act.
These inconsistencies have not been justified in terms of Section 5 of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act.
Make It 16 leader Anika Green, who is 17 years old, says the result has been a long time coming.
We were all so nervous because we had no idea which way this was going to go, but we were really hopeful about the Supreme Court issuing a declaration of inconsistency. And of course, yes, there were tears afterwards and some hugs because it's been such a long journey and we're just so happy to have got to here.
Make It 16 campaign co-director Caden Tippler says a voting age of 18 cannot be justified as 16 and 17-year-olds make adult decisions. The 17-year-old says the group has been saying for years it's a breach of human rights.
And now the courts have backed us. I don't think it can get any more serious than being a breach of human rights, and we urge Parliament to take this very seriously.
Parliament will now hold a special debate on whether to lower the age. But for the law to change, a 75% majority must be reached. National leader Christopher Luxon says his party supports the status quo.
You can pick a line anywhere around the world, and people pick lots of different ages and stages. From us, we just think 18. There's nothing wrong with what we've got selected as it is today, and it's perfectly fine.
But Green MP Golriz Garaman says shifting the voting age to 16 would strengthen our democracy and bring New Zealand in line with a handful of other countries.
We've got the Supreme Court telling us that the rights of New Zealanders are being breached pursuant to our Bill of Rights Act. So it's actually time to say we work for a democracy first and foremost, and we need to strengthen it. There's parliaments, in Canada, Scotland, all over the EU that have already done this. It's not a huge deal, and it keeps New Zealand in line with the kind of modern, inclusive democracy that we want to be.
Caden Tippler says politicians will be letting down rangatahi across the country if they don't lower the voting age.
If they don't, then Parliament is upholding a human rights violation within Aotearoa, and that simply isn't good enough.
They say the group will continue campaigning until the voting age is lowered.
And Graeme Edgeler is one of a team of lawyers who worked on the case for Make It 16, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Graeme.
Kia ora.
Swift action from the Prime Minister this afternoon announced that they're drafting legislation to lower the voting age. Everybody in Parliament will get a vote on it. What's your response to that?
I think I'm pleased, and it sounded like my clients are pleased as well. I'm on holiday at the moment, so I hadn't had a chance to see them. But it is good news for them, certainly, that Parliament will have not just sort of a debate, but an actual vote on this question.
Do you have a view on whether it could fit the criteria for a conscience vote? Or should?
It doesn't fit the sort of historical criteria. It's not really a sort of personal moral question type thing. Certainly the voting age votes that we had in 1969 when it reduced to 20, and 1974 when it reduced to 18, which it currently is now, those weren't conscience votes. And so it's not really a question of, sort of historically the conscience votes were, we shouldn't force someone to vote for something where they might end up going to hell, which, questions of the death penalty. If I'm personally responsible for someone's death and I think God tells me that I shouldn't kill, forcing an MP to vote that way, that's seen as sort of a step too far. I don't think this is really in that area. It's something on which parties should probably have a policy, whether that is, to vote for it or against it.
How quickly do you think things can be changed if there is a will to make change?
I don't think it can seriously happen that it would lower the voting age for the next parliamentary election, which will be next year. But it certainly could lower the voting age for the next local elections in 3 years' time, and certainly the parliamentary election after that. I think the Prime Minister was clear any change wouldn't happen for the next election because, this goes through an ordinary process. Even if they were to introduce it in a week or two, it could take 6 months at Select Committee, and then we're getting awfully close to the election where, enrolment has already started happening and the Electoral Commission has already sort of got its systems in place. So I would The government has been clear, and I'm not surprised that it won't happen before the next parliamentary election, but it could certainly happen before the one after that, and could very much happen for the next local elections, given that lowering the voting age for local elections is quite a bit simpler than lowering it for parliamentary elections.
Yeah, can you explain that, Graeme, so people understand the difference? So the Prime Minister is saying that you need a supermajority to change it for central government elections, so 75% or more. What's the deal with local government?
The local government, it's just a majority in the House, just like most other laws. If one more MP votes in favour of it than votes against it, it can become the law. So it's something that Labour wouldn't need any other party's support, although hopefully they might have a chance of getting it. Certainly the international experience is a lot of countries tend to trial sort of a voting age change by lowering it for sort of local elections or subnational elections. So you heard mention sort of Scotland, also Wales have voting at 16 for their local elections and for their local the Welsh Parliament and the Scottish Parliament, but the United Kingdom Parliament as a whole doesn't, and so that's certainly something we can do first, and something that's easier to do. So that's a possible result, given what we just heard the leader of the National Party say.
Graeme, did you all, and when I say all of you, I mean the legal team, did you all volunteer your time, or how did this work?
We all volunteered our time, yes.
So what led you to this?
We have not been paid.
Yeah.
Which is, I have supported a lower voting age personally for a while. Obviously, you don't have to support your client's position to act for them, but I thought this was a good cause, and it's something that I've thought was a good idea for a while, and happy to do my part. I sort of offered them some help when the campaign started up. They said, well, what help do you need? I can help you draft a bill. You try and get an MP to put a member's bill or something like that. And then sort of the Taylor decision about declaring existence about voting rights came out, and they thought, we could try for one of those. And,
smart group of teens, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Much more impressive than I was at 16 or 17. I can certainly say that.
Graeme, do you know how many more voters this would create if it went through?
It's not a vast number. I think I'm not sure the exact number, but I think it's less than 200,000 people at any one time who are 16 or 17. And so it might be able to swing a close election, but probably won't make that much of a difference. Often at the first election, sort of evidence shows that people don't vote all that differently from their parents. Certainly many will, as often couples vote differently. Family isn't a guarantee, but the international experience is it doesn't make a very big difference in the result, but it does make sort of that 100 to 200,000 more people feel slightly more included in the system, and hopefully that would be a good thing.
One of the things that some people may raise is that this could lead to other age limits being challenged. Does it open the door for that? An example, alcohol.
This particular decision, I don't think does. Any age that the government has got, or at least any age from 16 or higher, because importantly, and one of the things that New Zealand differs from other countries is we've got a Bill of Rights Act that says the government can't discriminate without a good reason. One of the reasons you can't discriminate on is age, and that starts at 16 in New Zealand, which sort of Canada and the UK and various other places which might have similar challenges like this don't have a hard rule of 16 is the age at which age discrimination starts. And I think that was an important reason for the Supreme Court in making its final decision was Parliament's decided 16 is the age at which you need a good reason to discriminate against someone on the basis of age. And in this particular case, the government didn't offer a good reason. They said, in short, that the courts shouldn't look at it, but if they do look at it, they didn't say there was a good reason. And so I think if it came up to alcohol or smoking or something like that, you would probably get the point where, the government has done a pretty big, research and assessment process on what the alcohol age should be. There were law commission reports and all those sorts of things. So I suspect if someone did challenge the alcohol age, the government would take a different approach to the litigation, saying, no, we've got a really good reason why 16 and 17-year-olds shouldn't be able to drink and buy alcohol. And we think those are good reasons that justify the discrimination in that case. The problem in this case, they didn't really try to justify it. They said, we think it's justified, but we can't tell you why, and we're not going to call it evidence to show it is. And in a declaration of a consistency case, once the claimants proved there was discrimination, it's up to the government to say, here's the good reason for it. And in this case, they didn't. And I suspect in most of the other cases where you're thinking about age limits, the government would take a different approach. And it might be, this is only really the second declaration of inconsistency case we've had. The government and the lawyers on the other side still are all learning about how the process is. And I suspect as we go forward with other cases around declarations of inconsistency, the government might take a different approach to what type of evidence it calls and what type of arguments it makes to say this is a good idea, why we did this.
Understood.
The fact they didn't do this in this case has been a bit of a problem for them.
Really interesting to talk to you, Graeme. Thank you so much for your time. That is Graeme Edgeler, one of a team of lawyers who worked on that case for Make It 16. It is 19 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that one, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Do you support lowering the voting age to 16? And give us the reasons for your opinion. Lydia Ko has claimed the largest first place prize in the history of women's sport. The 25-year-old won the season-ending LPGA Tour Championship event in Naples, Florida, by 2 shots, which also confirmed her as the Player of the Year. She pockets a whopping $3.25 million New Zealand dollars for the win. Felicity Reid has this report.
Life is good for Lydia Ko. The 25-year-old won her 3rd LPGA title of the year, clinched the points-based award for LPGA Player of the Year, and won the VAR trophy for having the lowest scoring average this season. Ko describes it as a dream come true during probably her most solid year on the tour.
This year has been an incredible year. I really could never ask for more, to win so early in the season and then to have won in Korea and then win the last event of the year. I couldn't have drawn it up any better.
Ko is now close to getting the points required to qualify for a spot in the LPGA Hall of Fame. She has previously spoken of her plan to retire from golf by the time she's 30, and knows her place among the legends in the game could come next season before she turns 26.
If it happens, that's great and it'll be a huge honour, but that's definitely not like the biggest thing, as a goal for next year.
Ko previously won the Player of the Year honour in 2015. She says a lot has changed on and off the course since she was the naive, glasses-wearing 17-year-old winner.
I think my perspective and how I treat the bad shots or the bad events a lot better now than I did then. And I think I'm excited with where I am at in life and at the golf course. I don't miss the times of wearing the glasses and having to clean my lenses.
Ko says she's still 5 years old in her mum's eyes and she won't be that impressed by her daughter's 19th LPGA title.
My mom especially keeps me super grounded, and I'm sure today she might go, "Oh, remember that thin that you hit on 14 and went in the water?" I was like, "Yes, thanks, Mom." But I think because of her and because of my family, they've been through this journey with me. I remember coming over to the U.S. for the first time when I was a junior to play the Callaway Junior Worlds in San Diego. And she's been through that with me since day one, doing that in a foreign country, driving 8 hours with me to junior events back in New Zealand as well. And because of her, this kind of moment happens.
Another important person in Ko's life is her fiancé, who she'll marry in the off-season. Today was the first time he was at the course when she won.
My golf really is not how he perceives me. And for a while when things weren't going great in my career, my identity felt so connected to golf. And after meeting him, I've actually wanted to work harder during the times that I am working and then also enjoy time off.
Ko says she won't be toasting her successful season with an alcoholic beverage today. Instead, she'll be hitting the road for a 3-hour drive home to Orlando after a stop at one of her tour party's favourite spots.
I've been to the Korean restaurant here in Naples for 5-6 times. I've only been here 7 days. So they may actually say go there.
Asked if she'd be back in New Zealand during the off-season, Ko was non-committal. However, Golf New Zealand Chief Executive Dean Murphy believes Ko is an inspiration whose success will have wide-ranging impact for all sports.
Lydia not only is the best golfer from New Zealand, she is also just such a first-class human. So to see her perform so well and to do so humbly and with such grace on the world stage, it's such a great example for us all.
Next season, the LPGA Tour will have 33 events and more than $164 million on offer.
And it's 23 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. The whole of Parliament will vote on whether to lower the voting age to 16. What are your reckons on that one? Let us know, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And wow, go Lydia Ko. Let us know your thoughts on that one too. Email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to go to the headlines now with Evie. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. The Prime Minister says draft legislation will be drawn up so MPs across the House can debate whether to lower the voting age to 16. But any change wouldn't take effect for the 2023 election. The Supreme Court has declared the voting age of 18 discriminatory and inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act. Both the National Party and ACT says they're happy with the status quo on the voting age, while the Greens support lowering it, with MP Golritz Garaman saying it would strengthen our democracy. The police remain at two houses in West and North Auckland as the investigation into a firearms incident in Huapai continues. This morning, two schools in Kumiu's Huapai were in lockdown following reports of gunfire. The police say staff remain at a property on Main Road and at a related one on Lancaster Road in Beach Haven. Ngāti Wairere have filed a Treaty of Waitangi claim over a proposed housing project that's due to be built on a significant heritage site in Hamilton, saying they were never consulted. The Sports Minister, Grant Robertson, says an event to celebrate the Black Ferns Rugby World Cup win, which will be held at Parliament on Tuesday, December the 13th, will be a chance for New Zealanders to meet, mingle and celebrate with the players. And severe weather warnings and evacuation orders are being issued across parts of Victoria and New South Wales as Australia's horror spring continues. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, let me just get this up. In the North Island, a crash on State Highway 1 north of Kaitaia near Kaimomo Road may be causing you some delays in Northland. We're just waiting on an update there. And in the South Island, at Ryle Bush north of Invercargill, a crash has closed State Highway 6 between Breeze Road and Collinson Road. There's a detour in place. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Armed police remain at the scene of an incident this afternoon that saw dozens of residents evacuated from a street on Auckland's North Shore. RNZ reporter Haisa Almeida is on Lancaster Road in the suburb of Beach Haven and she joins us now. Kia ora, what can you see there, Haisa?
Kia ora, Lisa. We've been here since mid-afternoon where the most of Lancaster Road was blocked off by police cars. About 12 to 15 police cars could be seen at the scene and the residents couldn't access their houses as they've also been evacuated. Right now, as you can see just behind me, this is the house where the incident happened and it's been cordoned off. Police is still here. We could see dog units. We could see the police helicopter around earlier on. So it was quite a few bit, a lot of neighbours, a lot of curious people around. And the police remains on site.
And what have the residents been telling you there?
We spoke to a few of them and some of them were quite hostile towards media. We had a lot of residents around the house that wouldn't let us do our jobs in many ways, which was quite sad. But most residents they say the neighborhood is quite quiet, but the police presence here has been much bigger since for about 2 years. They say that they heard, when I interviewed one girl, that she heard the police on a megaphone right when she was arriving her house, the police asking everyone to leave. So she had to leave her house as soon as she got back from school to go back to where her mum worked, which is a dairy really close to the house where the incident happened. So they are scared, but they say it's not uncommon gang activity and police presence around the area.
And the police, what have they had to say?
Well, police is not saying much about the incident. What they are saying is this incident is connected to one that happened earlier on in Huapai, West Auckland, where several kindergartens were put in lockdown for a few hours. The lockdown have already been lifted, but this incidents, according to the police, they are connected, even though we don't know exactly what's happening there. But they say that both incidents are related and they're investigating on top of it.
Thank you for the update. That's RNZ reporter Haisa Almeida joining us from the Lancaster Road site where there are armed police still in the area. The world champion Black Ferns will keep the celebrations going for a few weeks yet. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced this afternoon the government will be backing an event next month that will allow fans to mix and mingle with the team. We're joined by our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. Kia ora, Felicity. So what do we know about the latest plans for a celebration?
So we've locked in a date. That's December 13. That's a Tuesday afternoon. That'll be at Parliament, so in Wellington, on the lawn at Parliament Lawn. That gives an opportunity for some of those fans that maybe weren't able to get to, say, Auckland or Northland for this tournament to mix and mingle with these world champions. A couple of these players have actually been able to get back to their hometowns and mix with some of these fans, but not everybody has been able to. So it's a bit of a coming back together a little bit after the tournament is finished. An opportunity for the government to back this event as well. Wellington City Council and New Zealand Rugby have also jumped on board.
Yeah, and some of them have been dominating the world stage in Monaco at the World Rugby Awards. So who picked up some prizes?
Oh, yeah, it's a big day for New Zealand women at the World Rugby Awards. It was co-captain Rurahe Demant. She picked up Women's 15s Player of the Year. This was a recognition for her leadership as well as her ability on the field. It was also, she picked up that again. It was another New Zealander was a finalist in that as well, Portia Woodman. So a couple of New Zealanders up for the best women's player in the world, so that's pretty good. Coach of the Year went to Wayne Smith. That was recognition for his 6-month turnaround of this team and getting them another world title. He won that ahead of the Ireland and France men's teams coaches, as well as the England women's coach Simon Middleton. And Ruby Tui, a bit of a fan favourite here, she got Breakthrough Player of the Year. So that was recognition for her switch from 7s to 15s. She is 30 years old, so to be called a breakthrough player at that age is a little bit different. But she started in 10 of the 12 tests this year and scored 8 tries, so it's probably good recognition for somebody who has switched her skills from that shorter format to the 15-a-side game. She picked up that award ahead of Maya Rose, so again, another New Zealand finalist in that.
That's so hard when you're in there with your buds as well,
Oh,
your buddies. It's like, it's tough.
And so also Ruby, at this award, she got a replacement gold medal. She gave away her gold medal to a cancer patient after the World Cup and was a little bit, kept it on the quiet, but today she got a replacement one so that she'll be able to keep one of her own as well for this big moment for her. And Ruby, as well as Demant and Teresa Fitzpatrick and Portia Woodman, were named in this year's Dream Team of the tournament. So this was picked up as well. Canada, USA and England also had players in this team for the women's team. We'll just mention that none of the All Blacks were named in any of the Player of the Year awards or anything like that, which may be a little bit of a shock to some of them. And also on the administrator side, Dr. Farah Palmer picked up a Distinguished Service Award. She's a 3-time World Cup winner and former Black Ferns captain, so it was her long-term involvement in the game which was recognised with this award.
And what a cracker of a day for sport. Golfer Lydia Ko, massive payday for her, right? And an amazing finish to her season. How did she end up with so many accolades? And she got Rolex Player of the Year, you know.
Well, that Player of the Year award wasn't necessarily a shoo-in when she went into this final event. There was 4 players who actually were in with a mathematical chance of picking up this award. She was 1 point ahead of Australia's Minjee Lee. So Minjee Lee actually finished 16 shots behind Lydia at this final event of the year, which is what handed Lydia her second Player of the Year title. So for her, this wasn't necessarily going to be such a big day as what it was, but she has picked that up. And again, second consecutive year for the lowest average score, and so her average score this season was 68.988, which was actually the second lowest in tour history.
That is incredible. Do you play golf?
Not like Lydia.
No, I can't hit the side of a house with a golf club. Thank you, Felicity. That is Felicity Reid, our sports reporter there. An enormous fireball seen over the North Island has astronomers scrambling to find the meteorite. Fireball's Aotearoa says it's likely to have landed in Northland and could be just the 10th meteorite Kiwi scientists have found in the last 150 years. Felix Walton has more.
The green streak across Northland on Saturday morning, followed by a bright orange light and a sonic boom, lasted just 6 seconds. A Northland farmer who initially thought it was the headlights of an incoming car said it was the biggest night sky event they'd ever seen, and they'd spent a lot of time herding cows in the dark. Geologist James Scott from Fireball's Aotearoa says the meteor could have left another kind of impression.
We think in this case here,
that this one may have actually dropped a meteorite. That is, enough material survived that fireball stage that a meteorite may have landed somewhere in the area between Dargaville and Whangarei.
Scott says that with enough information, his team could track it down.
We have imagery from 3 security cameras that have captured it, but of course there are far more that would have done that. If we had enough of the imagery, we could probably triangulate quite precisely where that meteorite fell.
One of those videos was caught by Logan Carpenter, an amateur astrophotographer based in Auckland. But the astronomy fan had his back turned as the rock soared overhead, just missing it.
I was actually imaging with my telescope at the time, but I had the telescope pointing in a different direction. My wife was just looking at the security cam the next day and said, "What's this white and glowing in the sky?" And I had a look at it and realised that the security camera had captured what looked like a fireball.
Stardome astronomer Josh Auraki says the biggest barrier to finding meteorites is knowing they've fallen in the first place.
You know, you have to kind of know that they're actually falling to the Earth. A lot of meteors would probably happen during the day, so we wouldn't even see them. And the ones that maybe do happen at night, you know, it might be cloudy, no one would actually witness them. And even if they do reach the ground, sometimes there's just no witnesses, so we have no idea that something has fallen to the ground.
He says getting hands-on with a genuine space rock is a truly special opportunity.
You know, these rocks date back to, 4.5 billion years old, a lot of them. So they kind of act as these relics and kind of time capsules of, what the early solar system was like. And essentially, those bigger questions of, where does it all come from?
James Scott is encouraging people to check their security footage to narrow down its landing zone.
And these things are particularly significant because they provide information about the solar system. So this rock, it's probably billions of years old, and so they're real scientific gold mines if you can get your hands on them. And New Zealand has very few of them.
He says if anyone finds the meteorite, he hopes they'll consider donating it to a museum or lab.
25 minutes to 6. Well, that could be a cracker of a treasure hunt. And it is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. She joins me in the studio. Honey, you want to talk about honey? It's been a big hit in Asia online Singles Day event. What's that all about? Buying it as a gift?
Yeah, so Singles Day is sort of, I think it was kind of created to be the ante to the Valentine's Day.
But it's still honey for your honey. That's what you're saying, isn't
honey
it?
for your honey. But Singles Day is November 11th. So it's 11, or 111.
Yes, lucky numbers.
1, right. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So single numbers, I guess. Whatever. It's a very popular day for shoppers online in China. Anyway, and Comvita was a big hit. It got the, its products came first, second, and third in the honey category. Well, that's pretty good. And sixth as a international
volume
brand.
of purchases?
First, second, and third in the honey category, and sixth in the broader health foods category. It was the only international entry in that list, according to Comvita. So they are very chuffed with all of that. Sweet sales for Comvita, and as a matter of fact, the company reaffirmed its underlying profit as a result, and they're expecting the second half to outperform the first. So good news for Comvita. They were pretty darn happy with that.
That's a cute little story, Nona. Okay, Wellington's commercial rental market is expected to see sharp increases over the coming years. What's the reason?
So, well, not good if you're looking for a place in the short term, because there are some issues with some seismically secure buildings. Some companies are demanding that their office space be 100% of the new standards, but already there's a lot of buildings that are sitting empty because they only are 33% of the standard. And while 68% of the standard is a standard, some are saying that's not quite good enough. And there aren't that many buildings available right now to fill that gap. So they're expecting in the next 5 years, there'll be a lot more buildings that are going to be coming up to that new standard. There'll be some buildings that are going to be converted into hotels and other. But in the meantime, there is a shortage. And so that's going to be reflected in the rental prices. And so if you don't already have a space secured, you might be paying a lot more for what you can get.
I find that really interesting because I would have thought work from home has alleviated some of the pressure on bricks and mortar office space.
You would think, but
apparently not.
Never mind. I guess there's still plenty of people looking for office space in Wellington.
Okay.
And that's not available.
Let's hear what the markets had to offer today.
Okay, so our market rose 0.5%. That was a 60-point gain to 11,300. 381. And that's pretty good because the Asian markets are pretty cautious at the moment with China increasing its lockdown provisions in Beijing and elsewhere. And so, yes, that's not a good sign for the Asian markets. Never mind, though, we still went up 0.5%. And the Kiwi is steady at 61.4 US cents. A little bit up against the Australian at 92.3, and steady again against the British pence at 51.8.
It's always stubborn against the pound.
Thank you,
Nona.
yes. We'll see what happens with that.
Nona Peltier with business news there. It is 22 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I think we'll do some of your feedback now, shall we? A lot of you getting in touch about the voting age. This person says, where are we? Voting age question should go to a referendum due to it being so very important to our idea of democracy. Personally, I support it, says William. Another says, this is Sandy who's got in touch, saying voting age at 16 years old, no way. They're talking about increasing the drinking age from 18 because most can't drink responsibly, so I feel most aren't mature enough to vote at 16. That's an interesting point, Sandy, but I think if we're using drinking responsibly as a measure of whether you're mature enough to vote, there's a lot of people who are in their middle age who maybe don't meet the bar either. Steve says, I'm a middle-aged male. I will not vote for any party that doesn't fully support a change in the voting age to 16. Phil's got in touch to say young people tend to vote left. This is because they are idealistic and inexperienced. As we know, older people are more conservative. This is why support falls along party lines. This should be mentioned for an honest discussion. Phil, send us the link to that research. We'll be really interested to have a look at it. Someone else says if 16-year-olds can vote, they should be tried in an adult court. You shouldn't have things both ways. Another opinion in here, dropping the age is fine, but how many will vote? The percentage of people voting needs to be higher. And another says this voting age discussion is interesting. I'm not personally decided, but voting in a democracy is a mark of adulthood. So interested in their argument as to why 16 and 17-year-olds shouldn't enter the criminal justice system as adults, also armed services, etc. All the less desirable aspects of the consequences that go with adult responsibilities and rights. Just curious, that listener says. Homai o whakaaro, do keep your feedback coming. We're interested in your thoughts on the voting age, whether you're for it being lowered to 16 or against it, and what your reasons are. Do text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to go to the headlines. Anaia Evi, mena pitipita kōrero.
The Prime Minister says it will be up to the Speaker to decide whether a proposal to lower the voting age from 18 to 16 will be a conscience vote where MPs aren't bound to vote along party lines. Any change to the voting age will require the backing of 3/4 of Parliament or a majority vote in a referendum. The police say they believe a firearms incident in Huapai in West Auckland was isolated and happened between parties known to each other. Police remain at a property on Main Road in Huapai and at a related one on Lancaster Road in Beach Haven. The Ministry of Health is reporting 24,068 new cases of COVID-19 over the past week. 40 people are being reported to have died with the virus, including a child under the age of 10. The 7-day rolling average of cases is 3,434, an increase of 355 in the past week. In China, Beijing is asking around 3 million residents in part of the city to stay home after reporting its first COVID death in 6 months. The country has continued to enact a stringent zero-COVID policy, but on Sunday it reported the death of an elderly man and more than 600 new cases in the capital. And Russian forces are pounding Ukrainian positions with artillery fire, with almost 400 strikes launched against the eastern region alone in the past day, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky in a video address. Mr. Zelensky said the fiercest battles are in the Donetsk region. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the South Island, a 2-vehicle crash has closed State Highway 6 at Ryle Bush north of Invercargill. Between Breeze Road and Collinson Road, it looks like no one's been injured, luckily, but there is a detour in place. And there's reportedly been a crash this afternoon in Northland on State Highway 1 north of Kaitaia near Kaimomo Road. There may be delays there. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora rā e ho. The government says all MPs will get to vote on whether to lower the voting age to 16 years old for general elections, following today's Supreme Court decision that the current law is discriminatory. The Prime Minister says once drafted, a law change will need 75% support to pass and wouldn't come into force in time for the next election. The Greens support dropping the voting age to 16. National Party doesn't want a bar of it, and Labour hasn't made its mind up yet, although the Prime Minister personally supports 16-year-olds voting. Ko taku manuhiri inai ko Kiri Allan, the Justice Minister, joins us now live. Kia ora, Minister.
Hey, kia ora, Lisa.
Can you think of one good reason not to give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote?
Well, I think you probably will get a whole range of different views depending on who you speak to. But I think this is quite an interesting, we've had an interesting outcome from the Supreme Court today that did make that declaration of inconsistency with the Bill of Rights. This is interesting from two perspectives. We've just recently passed the Declaration of Inconsistency Bill here in the Parliament, so this is the first declaration that will go through the new process that we're required to pass as a Parliament. But secondly, too, just going to the broader and more substantive issue, when we've had the Supreme Court say this is inconsistent with the Bill of Rights, now Parliament turn your minds and consider the implications of that. I'm looking forward to this being part of the debate and discussion that we as parliamentarians have.
That was a really interesting sidestep, Minister. Back to my original question, and can I put it another way? Do you support personally, the Prime Minister has expressed her personal opinion, do you personally support giving the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds?
Yeah, no, personally I do. I do. I think it's really been like the Prime Minister and myself as well, we're one vote of 120. We need to get 75 votes to get it over the line. But why I personally support it is, 16 years old, I'd left school by that time. I was paying taxes on a full-time wage. You can go out there, you can, you can drive cars, you can have sex, you can do a whole range of things that we expect to kind of fall within that domain of being able to make decisions that are more akin to adults than children. So, look, I think that this will be an interesting debate. I'm sure that there are a range of different views in opposition, and we'll hear those too. And it's for the Parliament to ultimately make that determination, and the reserve provisions will kick in.
While we've been talking, we've been getting feedback on this thick and fast, as you can imagine. One of the questions that have been posed by some of our listeners is, if you give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote, shouldn't they be treated as an adult in all aspects of the system, including the criminal justice system? And you, as the Minister who has that portfolio, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a whole range of responsibilities that come with the right to vote, and I think that the debate that was had in the Supreme Court in advance by the Make It 16 Incorporated group, they did put down the argument for all of the types of things that you can do as an adult that you can't do, that you can do as a 16-year-old that are more akin to those life choices or abilities that adults have. Look, there are distinguishments and differentiations, you're right, in criminal law and across a range of other areas. Whether we go the whole hog, I don't know. But what I do think is that this is an important debate to have as the Parliament. The reserve provisions, we do require 90 parliamentarians to change the law, but let's have that debate on the back of the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court's findings today.
I know it's a Speaker's decision, but again, personally, do you reckon it should be a conscience vote?
Well, there are two ways about this. So if the Speaker determines that it's not a conscience vote, you can still then, there are ways for parties to be able to cast split votes. So whether or not it's a conscience vote, I don't think that's the end position in terms of the way that political parties have to cast their votes. And I know that all of us will be turning our minds as to how we approach it as parties and as individuals over the next little while before the introduction of the bill.
So can you just clear one thing up for us? The Prime Minister has said today drafting legislation needs a supermajority, 75% of the vote. That is for voting in a general election, lowering the age for a general election. When it comes to local body elections, as I understand it, it's a simple majority that's needed. So are you going to split these two issues, or are you going to deal with them all as one piece of legislation, or how is it going to be handled?
I think that these are probably, look, I've still got to make some decisions on this, but the the nature of the discussions that we had at Cabinet today was that we would advance the age issue as one issue, so that would be applicable to all respective votes, so local government, general elections, etc.
So 6 months to report to Parliament, right? What's that going to involve? Who's going to get a say?
Yeah, so the process from here on out, 6 days, the Attorney General has to make a statement in the House declaring that there has been a declaration of inconsistency. Then it's referred to the Select Committee. The Select Committee has 4 months that they must report back to the Parliament with their findings. To the extent possible, I think we'll try and double up the timing there so that the bill, when it's introduced into the House, that we can also utilise the Select Committee's time looking into both the bill and preparing their report for tabling within 4 months. The executive is then required to provide their response within 6 month period. So, look, I expect that we'll be hearing from many New Zealanders through the course of this inquiry and as the bill proceeds. Make a quick procedural note. 75% of the Parliament aren't required to pass the first reading in the House. It's only once we get to that committee of the whole stage. So either which way, if we get more than a 50% vote at the first reading, that bill will be referred to the Select Committee.
Do you want people to put aside their differences so this gets a fair crack and a fair hearing and at least get to that stage? Let it through.
Oh, look, I always think I like to think that we as a Parliament can approach these issues, particularly when it comes to Bill of Rights issues. You would have heard me over the weekend talking about issues of a different nature, but all concerned with balancing Bill of Rights, rights that we are entitled to, with other considerations. So I hope that as a Parliament, we engage constructively. The Supreme Court has now made this determination. That's the end of the road when it comes to what the courts can consider. And now it really is to the Parliament to make a decision. So I'm assured that it will likely, I'm sure, get through that first reading hurdle, and then it will go to the Committee of the Whole, and that's when we can, the Select Committee process, and then we can hear from New Zealanders about what you all think.
Thank you, Minister. Really appreciate your time. That's Kiri, Allan, the Justice Minister there. It is 10 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The disability support sector says it's facing a critical staffing crisis for support workers, with higher paying hospital roles making it impossible to retain staff. And young people living with a disability say there aren't enough workers of a similar age, bringing stigma and shame when out in public. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi filed this report.
In 2016, a horse riding accident left Sophia Malthus paralysed and in a wheelchair. Now the 25-year-old relies on support workers 24/7, with 2 workers a day, each covering 12-hour shifts. But it's been difficult to find support workers around her age.
I guess I'm at the age where a lot of people are travelling, and so lots of people aren't in New Zealand to do this job. But also a lot of people that are interested in this job are student nurses, and so they'll come for their last year and then they'll leave to go work in the hospitals.
Relying on older carers has a huge impact on whether she wants to leave the house or not.
I just knew, when I was out shopping, I could tell that people were looking at me, and knowing that this was a caregiver-disabled client relationship, and that made me feel really uncomfortable. So it definitely affected how often I went into the community and was seen.
Sophia has managed to find a few workers similar to her, including Indy. The pair's relationship has grown so close over the years, they're less like workers and more like sisters.
I don't like how you're doing my hair.
You said twisted.
Yeah, but I just wanted these bits.
It's not really my skill set.
Finally, Sophia's able to go about her day without looking like she needs to be taken care of. The pair spend time walking her dogs Bear and Mindy, eating out, doing hair and makeup, and quizzing each other on their law studies.
Really just anything that 2 friends would do together, we do together, because we are friends, even though she gets paid to hang out with me. We always make the joke that sometimes I should be the one getting paid to look after her.
Indy originally moved up to Auckland to pursue an acting career, but that wasn't paying her rent. When Sophia offered her a job 2 years ago, she was hesitant to take on what she thought was a healthcare role.
At the start I was a bit like, oh, that is not my skill set. And then I just did it and kind of worked out. I didn't think I'd be doing this like full-time, 70 hours a week type thing.
She says you don't need to be a nurse to do the work and people can learn on the job. A traditional day starts with getting Sophia out of bed, cooking or cleaning, then they simply hang out.
Honestly, every day looks different. Like, you're essentially helping someone go about their day and live their life. So you get to do all the fun stuff that's like in their life and just kind of help them out. Like, I don't know, you don't ever really get bored.
Manasi Lua from Te Po's Disability Workforce Development Program says they need more people like Indy in the workforce.
So we're looking to target Māori, Pacifica, Asian, particularly males to come into the workforce. Right now the workforce is largely female, European and over 50.
While carers can upskill and train in the role, they don't need qualifications to begin.
It's not just a job, this is a career about human beings, supporting people, helping and assisting, and also getting to know that person and allowing that person to tell you how they would like to be supported and cared for. All you need is a good heart, a caring personality, and matching you with someone that has similar behaviours or things that they like that you do.
There are currently more than 1,000 vacancies on Seek. Sadly, for each vacancy, there's a person whose freedom and independence is compromised if they can't get help. A recent survey reported an 11 to 15% vacancy rate, many for more than a year. In 2017, a pay equity case ruled disability support workers should be paid close to the hospital healthcare assistant pay rate, but that's no longer the case. CEO of the Disability Support Network, Peter Reynolds, says healthcare assistants working in hospitals are about to get a 30% increase.
What's going to happen to disability support workers? Now, because the job is very much the same, what we fear is that some people working in our sector are going to say, if there's a vacancy in a DHB, why wouldn't I go and work there when I'm going to be paid 30% more than what I'm getting at the moment?
The Minister of Disability Issues, Portal Williams, has not responded to Checkpoint's request for comment.
Louise Tanuth reporting there, and if you'd like to see the video version of that story, it'll be on our webpage. To more of your feedback about voting, lots of opinions on this one, all along the spectrum. Allan's got in touch and says, as a 77-year-old, I absolutely support franchising 16-year-olds. Those who will inherit the responsibility for the world we leave should have the right to participate in determining the way it goes as soon as they can. Some will choose not to participate, just like every other age group. I would happily give my right to vote to a motivated and energetic 16-year-old. What an opportunity for schools to provide related education. And the flip side to Allan's feedback is this one. The vote should be withdrawn from those over 75. Life expectancy is too short to warrant them having any material influence on future policy. Another listener cites Scotland and says Scotland results for 16 plus voting age show a couple of interesting things. 16 plus were more likely to vote than 18 plus, and 50% of 16-year-olds voted differently to their parents. And this one in too, of course 16-year-olds should vote now, not 2026. Do keep it coming, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Ancient history is coming to life at an archaeological dig in Italy. Scientists are discovering art and artefacts that are thousands of years old, buried beneath the sands of time. CNN's Ben Wiedemann reports.
Archaeologists free from the mud and murky water, a masterpiece from the distant past. A bronze statue of a boy dating back perhaps more than 2,000 years. Wow. Excavations over the last 3 years at this ancient hot spring in San Casciano dei Bagni in the Tuscan hills are bringing treasures to the surface.
We found a bubble of time.
Professor Jacopo Taboli leads the international team here. he's still amazed at what they found.
The first coins came out with no corruption. They were perfect. And then slowly, it was one, it was two, there were thousands. And then the statue. So it was, of course, extremely emotional.
The artifacts date back to as early as the 2nd century BC, immaculately preserved by a combination of mud and mineral water. Ancient pilgrims would lower their offerings to the gods into the thermal water. Coins, bronze statues, and likenesses of specific body parts, hoping that by then bathing in those waters, the gods would heal their ailments. At a time when a rising Rome was at war with the Etruscans, the original inhabitants of the area, the two peoples mingled peacefully in the springs in search of health, healing, and fertility. At a restoration lab run by Italy's Culture Ministry, archaeologist Ada Saldi shows me some of those offerings, including a bronze likeness of vital organs. You can see the smallest details, she says, the trachea, the lungs with all the veins and arteries, the heart, the diaphragm, the liver, the spleen, and the intestines. Bronze feet, arms, and legs were also found in the muck. So far, more than 6,000 coins have been fished out of the mud, plus bronze heads, statues, and other items. A veteran of Italy's Antiquities Restoration Department, Simona Pozzi's job is to clean the antiquities and try to preserve them. I've never seen a find like this, she tells me. Several other springs in the area have yet to be excavated. The mud and water have yet to yield all their ancient secrets.
So much feedback on this issue of voting. Colette from Palmerston reckons if you pay tax, which you do at 16 if you're earning, then you should get a say in how those taxes are spent. Lots more on this topic too. Get your thoughts to us, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The National Party has shot down calls for the voting age to be dropped to 16, saying it's happy with the status quo. The Prime Minister says draft legislation will be drawn up so MPs across the House can have the debate, but any change wouldn't take effect for the 2023 election. It comes after the Supreme Court today declared the voting age of 18 discriminatory and inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act. Any change, though, would require the backing of 3/4 of MPs or a majority vote in a referendum. But Nationals leader Christopher Luxon says he doesn't see a need for change.
It's not something that we support. Ultimately, you've got to draw a line somewhere. We're comfortable with the line being 18. It's lots of different countries have different places where the line's drawn, and from our point of view, 18 is just fine.
The Green Party says MPs should reduce the age limit before next year's election. However, a lawyer who worked on the case to lower the voting age says it's possible 16-year-olds may get a say in the next local body elections. Graeme Edgeler is one of a team of lawyers who worked on the case for Make It 16, the group that took the challenge to the courts. He told Checkpoint any law change wouldn't be ready for next year's general election, but could see 16-year-olds at the polls for the local body vote in 2025. The police have left a house on the North Shore in Auckland and a cordon has been lifted as the investigation into a firearms incident in West Auckland continues. This morning, 2 schools in Huapai and Kumiu were in lockdown following reports of gunfire. Residents of Lancaster Road and Beach Haven were evacuated for a time. 5 schools on the North Shore also went into lockdown. The lockdowns have all been lifted in Kumiu and on the North Shore. The police say they believe the firearms incident was isolated and happened between parties known to each other. A witness has described the terrifying moments a gunman opened fire in an LGBTQI nightclub in Colorado, killing 5 people. Colorado Governor Jared Polis, who became the first openly gay US governor, is calling the shooting sickening. Makeshift memorials have sprung up near the club with messages and flowers. Witness Joshua Thurman says he was dancing when he heard shots and saw the flash of a gun muzzle. He and a drag queen performer took cover in a dressing room.
We heard everything, and all I can think about is everything. My life, just everything, friends, family, loved ones.
Authorities are investigating whether it's a hate crime. The Ministry of Health is reporting 24,068 new cases of COVID-19 over the past week. 40 people are being reported to have died with the virus, including a child under the age of 10. The 7-day rolling average of cases is 3,434, an increase of 355 in the past week. 344 people are in hospital with the virus, including 3 in intensive care. Beijing is asking about 3 million residents in part of the city to stay home after reporting its first COVID death in 6 months. China has continued to enact a stringent zero COVID policy, but it's now reported the death of an elderly man and more than 600 new cases in the capital. Students in some areas are not attending schools and began online classes today. Residents in some of the hardest hit areas are being urged to stay home. News of the outbreak also dragged Asian share markets lower as investors fretted about economic fallouts from any fresh restrictions in China. Police are pursuing new leads into the disappearance of a Canterbury man 23 years ago, restarting a search last week. Graeme Vanstone disappeared from his Akaroa home on September the 5th, 1999, and hasn't been seen or heard from since. Police say a review highlighted uncharted areas that needed to be searched, and they had to wait for better weather, given the slippery and steep terrain. These spots were searched last Thursday and Friday. A police spokesperson says they received new information after the operation was publicised. And a meteorite that's thought to have landed in Northland has astronomers wondering what secrets it would hold. Witnesses from Kaitaia to the Waikato reported seeing a spectacular fireball above Northland early on Saturday morning. Kiwi scientists have found just 9 meteorites in the last 150 years, making the sighting a rare opportunity. Stardome astronomer Josh Aldaki says the ancient rocks contain valuable information about space.
These rocks date back to, 4.5 billion years old, a lot of them. So they kind of act as these relics and kind of time capsules of, what the early solar system was like. And essentially, those bigger questions of, where does it all come from?
Josh Aldaki says meteorites are rare in New Zealand because they often fall in places where nobody can see them. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, green gold, the invisible forces that turned so-called rabbit food into the world's first seasonless produce. We ask Peter Mathias if the dinner party is dead, and if it isn't, what do we bring? And Dame Patsy Reddy chooses a piece of classical music to mark the NZSO's 75th anniversary. It's all on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Waikato, occasional rain, sometimes heavy, with possible thunderstorms in the afternoons and evenings again. Northerly gales tomorrow evening in exposed places. From Waitomo to Wellington, also for the Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Occasional rain clearing this evening. Occasional rain with heavy falls and thunderstorms developing from tomorrow afternoon. Northerly gales tomorrow evening in exposed places. From Gisborne to Wadaduppa, scattered rain clearing this evening, returning tomorrow afternoon and evening. Nelson and Marlborough, scattered rain this afternoon, a few showers tomorrow turning to rain in the evening. From Buller to Fiordland, periods of rain with heavy and possibly thundery falls. For Canterbury, rain about the high country and a few spots further east. Otago and Southland, scattered rain, possibly heavy, with thunderstorms this evening. And Kohu, Chatham Islands, occasional light rain clearing tomorrow afternoon. The time is 6 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thanks, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Monumentous and disappointing. That's the verdict on the UN's climate summit, which has closed in Egypt. A deal to set up a fund for poor countries being battered by climate disasters has been widely praised as a triumph for helping the vulnerable. But others have lamented the failure to really tackle emissions that are causing climate change. The BBC's environment editor, Justin Rowlett, sums up the meeting.
This is what this climate conference will be remembered for.
Objections is so decided.
An agreement to create a fund to help vulnerable nations with the loss and damage climate change is causing. The deal on loss and damage is undoubtedly a breakthrough, but there is huge disappointment in this room. Disappointment that the rest of the text is not more ambitious. Leaders of delegations met to discuss how they could change the wording to increase the effort to cut emissions. The aim of these summits is to raise ambition every year, but today's deal goes no further than what was agreed last year in Glasgow. What is low emission energy? There's even a clause which could allow natural gas to be classified as green.
There was a very strong move by some of the petro-states to try and unwind some of those decisions and in fact go back to pre-Paris kind of arrangements. And so, I mean, as you can tell, because how late we are, it was sort of trench warfare on that.
Many countries wanted the targets to be much stronger.
Emissions peaking before 2025, as the science tells us, is necessary. Not in this text. Clear follow-through on the phase down of coal. Not in this text. A clear commitment to phase out all fossil fuels. Not in this text. And the energy text weakened in the final minutes.
But the deal on loss and damage is genuinely a breakthrough, says the woman who led negotiations for developing countries.
It's given me hope. It's restored faith in multilateralism. It's given us all hope in the COP system and literally in the power of working together.
The problem is the rest of the deal is so disappointing. It means what could have been a triumph for Egypt is likely to end up being judged a failure.
The FIFA World Cup has kicked off in Qatar, but politics rather than football continues to take the spotlight. Iran takes the field against England at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning amidst ongoing turmoil and protests at home. Hundreds have been killed and thousands detained as the Iran regime brutally cracks down on protests after the death of Masha Amini in police custody. The coach of the Iranian team says players can protest as long as they don't break FIFA rules. Some players, including the team captain, have spoken out, sharing their support for the protesters. CNN's Don Riddell has more.
Qatar will almost feel like a home tournament for these players. Iran is situated just across the narrow Persian Gulf. They should be one of the most popular teams in the draw, but Iran's reputation on the international stage has led to calls for FIFA to ban the team from the tournament. However, Kodos believes that competing will enable the players to shine a light on the situation, but it remains to be seen how bold they will be.
ادامه میدن. ارسال یه برگردون از احمدزاده و چه گلی میزنه. یه سوپر گل.
When Iran won the Intercontinental Beach Soccer Cup final earlier this month, one of their players seemed to show solidarity with the women who've been publicly cutting their hair in protest. The Iranian Football Federation said that protesting players would be, quote, dealt with, but they might find it harder to influence the fans in Qatar. Perhaps Iran's proudest World Cup moment came in 1998 when they beat the United States of America. Once again, Iran will play the US, plus England and Wales, teams whose governments have all been highly critical of the regime's crackdown. But Kodos is hoping to put football before politics and says he's motivated to play for the fans.
I'm very optimistic about it, and as long as we believe it as a team, because the team spirit is very strong and we want to achieve our goal and we want to win every game. And as long as everybody's believing in it, I think we can make it together.
It is going to be fascinating to see how this game plays out on Monday, both on and off the field. To answer one of the questions raised in that report, what about Iran being thrown out of the tournament? Well, the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, was asked about that on Saturday. He said, no, this is not two regimes playing against each other. What about the players and whose side are they on when it comes to the protests back home and the behaviour of their government over the last 3 months? It was reported that the team was kind of split, but within the last couple of hours, the Iran captain, Ehsan Hajzafi, has come out and spoken and said, we are standing behind you, sympathy to all the bereaved families, and he referenced specifically a 10-year-old boy, Kian Perfalak, that died recently when his family car was hit by by a barrage of bullets, a barrage of gunfire. So it would seem as though the players, certainly based on what the captain has said tonight, that they stand with the protesters and the demonstrators across the Persian Gulf back home in Iran. There is a campaign movement, we'll see how this plays out, to chant Masa Amini's name after the 22nd minute of the game tomorrow.
And that was CNN's Don Riddell reporting from Qatar. Meanwhile, a British comedian has shredded £10,000 in protest at David Beckham supporting the FIFA World Cup. Beckham played in 3 World Cups, but his support for the event in Qatar has drawn harsh criticism. The BBC's Charlotte Gallagher has more.
Lovely. Hello. Hello, are you well?
Joe Lycett is one of the UK's biggest comedians and no stranger to headlines. He's taken on oil companies, politicians and even the designer Hugo Boss. And now he's turned his attention to David Beckham.
If you end your relationship with Qatar, I'll donate this 10 grand of my own money, that's £1 for every million you're reportedly getting, to charities that support queer people in football. However, if you do not, at midday next Sunday, I will throw this money into a shredder just before the opening ceremony of the World Cup and stream it live on a website I've registered called benderslikebeckham.com. Not just the money, but also your status as a gay icon will be shredded.
Joe Lycett has accused David Beckham of branding himself as a gay icon, doing things like posing for the gay magazine Attitude, but then taking money from Qatar. It's illegal to be openly gay in Qatar. Punishments range from fines, long prison sentences, to the death sentence. Qatar's World Cup ambassador called homosexuality damage to the mind. The country's treatment of women and migrant workers has also been highlighted. Britain's Guardian newspaper says more than 6,500 foreign labourers have died in the 12 years since Qatar was awarded the World Cup, though Qatar says it's committed to ensuring the safety and dignity of all workers. David Beckham didn't respond to Joe Lycett, and the comedian posted a video of himself apparently shredding almost $12,000. Some footballers have spoken out about human rights, though. Eric Cantona has said migrant workers were treated horribly, and he won't even watch this year's World Cup.
And that report was from Charlotte Gallagher of the BBC. Back home now and more of your feedback. William from Auckland says, I am 16 and would vote given the chance. However, I think many parents of 16-year-olds are just getting another vote, as most 16-year-olds will just vote the way their parents do if they vote at all. And Auckland teachers got in touch to say lowering the voting age will strengthen our democracy. Schools can be sites for voting, and along with ramped up civics education, we will encourage voting for life. Young people vote across the spectrum of political parties in mock elections in secondary school. This one says David Seymour is out of touch, except with the people of Epsom, perhaps. I live in the provinces, they say, and I don't know of any 16-year-olds that aren't working part-time and paying tax. And look at all the kids in South Auckland who left school to work during COVID. Make it 16. Absolutely make it 16, this listener says. They can drive a car, fly a plane, have sex or get married. They can own and use a gun or a chainsaw. As for the argument that they'll just vote the same way as their parents, have you ever met a teenager? Says Sarah of Otutahi. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text. To the US, where a 22-year-old man is in custody after a mass shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. 5 people were killed and 25 were injured on Saturday night when the shooter opened fire at the popular Club Q. The attack has shattered what people thought of as a safe place. US President Joe Biden says the community has been subjected to horrific hate violence and gun violence must be addressed. CNN's Matt Jablow reports.
A nondescript strip mall in Colorado Springs was the setting of a terrifying burst of violence late Saturday night.
I'm so terribly saddened and heartbroken.
The call came in just before midnight. An active shooter armed with a long rifle at Club Q, a popular LGBTQ nightclub on North Academy Boulevard in Colorado Springs.
Initial evidence and interviews indicate that the suspect entered Club Q and immediately began shooting at people inside as he moved further into the club.
Colorado Springs Police Chief Adrian Vasquez says by the time officers arrived, 4 people were dead, dozens more injured. One of the injured died a short time later at the hospital.
We are all shocked and saddened that this occurred here this last night.
Police say it was a horrifying scene that could have been even worse. Shortly after the shooting began, according to police, 2 customers inside the club subdued the gunman and likely saved lives. Police say those 2 hero customers were not hurt.
We owe them a great debt of thanks.
According to police, the suspect, 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich, was arrested as soon as police arrived and taken to the hospital with unspecified injuries. Police would not speculate on a motive for the shooting, nor would they label it a hate crime.
Every citizen has the right to feel safe and secure in our city.
But they vowed to do everything possible to help ease the pain of the victims and their families.
We are working tirelessly to ensure that justice for the victims in this senseless and evil shooting is given.
It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Save power, leave Ukraine. That's the message from the head of Ukraine's largest private energy firm after waves of Russian attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure. DTEK chief executive Maxim Timchenko is calling on Ukrainians to leave the country if to reduce to demand on the battery-powered network. He says with each Russian attack, power supply is getting less reliable. Meanwhile, those who have survived the occupation are now facing another battle. Winter. CNN's Nick Robertson visited a village in eastern Ukraine where residents fear they may die in the coming cold with limited gas and electricity.
The road into Bohorodichna is a prelude for the destruction to come. Russian troops turned the church into a military base as Ukrainians forced them from the eastern village 6 weeks ago. Mykola, a former firefighter, survived the Russians. Surviving the coming winter, his next challenge.
He's going to show us where he's stocked the wood for the winter.
Winter here can be brutal.
In here?
He's proud. He's been working hard.
Yeah, all the wood's stacked up at the back there. And there's a little generator here as well, because there's no electricity in the village.
We'll survive. We survived the Germans, he tells us, a reference to World War II. I must stay, though. The Russians killed my brother. I buried him. He needs a proper service in a cemetery. He shows me his destroyed house, tells me he'll rebuild. Mostly self-sufficient, he has his own well, although he says the water must be boiled. His 91-year-old mother, who also refuses to leave, plans to survive the winter as she lived through the fighting in their bunker. When she comes out, she tells us she worries about the cold too. How much can you suffer, she says. The matches are wet, the candles are bad. This is a torment. Across town, Yuri is back for the first time since he left in May. His house and everything in it, 55 years of memories, destroyed. We had plans. We'll rebuild, he says, getting emotional and turning away. As deminers clear his house of explosives, he sees his long-lost cat. It's scared, but comes back for food. They show him a grenade they found, gently tell him his beehives are all smashed. Yuri wants to show us where he used to fish, a place of happy childhood memories. Takes us onto the blown bridge. Upriver, the water pumping plant he used to work at. Can it restart, I ask?
In principle, yes.
Да, если бы это деньги выделили, в принципе, можно запустить ее.
So what are the problems going to be?
The high-voltage cables across the river and transformers powering it are destroyed, he says. It can be done if there is funding.
Every house here destroyed or heavily damaged. No water, no electricity, no shops. It's what awaits every town and village in this country if the war front rolls through them.
Dozens around here, likely hundreds across the country. battered by each wave of this war. And as long as the war goes on, there will be more and more towns and villages like this. Restoring them this winter, so unlikely. It's not even clear if they can be rebuilt, reconnected to the power grid, for people to come back to them and have semi-normal lives, even by next year. It's not just the electricity, the gas, the communications that are getting downgraded through this winter. It is the country itself. It is going to take so much to rebuild and restore Ukraine.
For at least a decade, Scottish engineer Allan McMasters was thought to have invented the electric toaster. But now it turns out it was all a prank. And the claims of his invention are, well, toast. The BBC's Marco Silva uncovers the dangers of trusting too much in Wikipedia.
The best professional chefs from across the UK are battling it out.
There's this BBC cookery show called Great British Menu, where chefs come up with original dishes for a prestigious banquet. Scott Smith, who's based in Edinburgh, was on it last year.
So what are you making and what's the title?
Breakfast Club, and it's celebrating Allan McMasters, who invented the first electric toaster.
Oh.
A mouth-watering dessert inspired by one Allan McMasters. Scott didn't know it at the time, but he'd just fallen for an internet prank. I tracked him down.
When you got in contact, the question that was in my head was, why would you create a lie about the invention of a toaster?
And finding an answer took me back in time.
It was the 6th of February 2012.
And Alex, who you heard there, was an engineering student at the time. At a lecture, his class was warned against using Wikipedia as a source, and the lecturer
added an anecdote about the fact that his friend had set themselves as the inventor of the toaster on Wikipedia. We opened our laptops and quickly found the article.
A page about the toaster, open for anyone to edit.
So I jokingly said, I'll be the one to fix the article. I just changed it so that it said that my friend who was sat next to me, Allan McMasters, had in fact invented the toaster in Edinburgh in 1893.
Hello, I'm Allan McMasters, a recent graduate, and not the inventor of the toaster.
30-year-old Allan was sitting right next to Alex, as Alex did his editing.
Yeah, I felt a bit of guilt, but it sort of seemed like the article had already been vandalized anyway. I never expected it to last.
Wikipedia relies on volunteer editors to ensure articles are accurate. But on English Wikipedia, there are more than 6.5 million articles. And the one on the toaster appears to have fallen through the cracks.
A year later, we stumbled upon the fact that a newspaper had reported Allan as one of the great inventors in British history. And we thought this was hilarious.
So Alex decided to take the joke further. He created a whole Wikipedia article devoted to McMasters and his toaster.
Was there any moment where you felt bad for doing what you were doing?
If you get false information about who invented the toaster, it's a bit of trivia which doesn't have a significant real-world impact.
Except that it arguably did. In 2018, McMasters was long-listed, along with hundreds of other British scientists, to appear on the next £50 note.
So the next place it then showed up was on the Scottish Government's Brand Scotland website. The Scottish Government proclaimed how wonderful it is that the toaster was invented by a Scotsman.
After I approached them about this story, they removed this reference from the website. All the while, Alex's deception kept spreading, until a 15-year-old from the southeast of England sounded the alarm.
I read through Wikipedia a lot when I'm bored in class.
Adam first heard about McMasters at school, when a teacher suggested a photo illustrating his Wikipedia article was in fact a forgery.
It definitely looked really fake. It just does not look like a normal photo.
So last July, he shared his suspicions on a forum dedicated to Wikipedia vandalism. Since then, Alex's account has been blocked and the article on McMasters erased. But is that it for Allan McMasters?
Even as this hoax is uncovered, Allan McMasters, the inventor of the toaster, will loiter around on the internet for years and years to come. And it will be a reminder to people of the importance of fact-checking.
A giant male panda gifted by China to Taiwan has died. There's been an outpouring of grief in China and Taiwan, where Tuan Tuan and his breeding partner have been animal celebrities. The pandas were gifted at a time when relations between China and Taiwan were cordial, but things have soured. The BBC's Siobhan Leahy has more.
Vets first noticed 18-year-old Tuan Tuan was ill in August when he began suffering seizures and appeared increasingly unsteady and lethargic. Taiwan put aside tensions with Beijing and invited vets from China to help treat the bear, and hundreds of visitors left messages of love and support for him on a wall at Taipei Zoo. Earlier this week, officials from the zoo said they suspected Tuan Tuan had a brain tumour and he was moved into palliative care, with zookeepers lying with him throughout the nights. Then, on Saturday, Taipei Zoo spokesman Eric Zhao made this announcement.
We performed a CT scan and a vital signs assessment today. After seeing the results, we decided it was not possible for Tuan Tuan to live a quality life. We didn't want to, but we finally came to a consensus, and that was to let Tuan Tuan remain in a deep sleep. Our veterinarians at 1:48 in the afternoon observed that Tuan Tuan's heart had stopped beating.
Pandas are a national treasure in China, and Beijing has used the animals to help foster diplomatic ties with countries for more than half a century. It only leases pandas to foreign zoos, which must usually return any offspring within a few years of their birth to join the country's breeding programme. But Taiwan was granted an exception as part of a brief charm offensive China launched in the late 2000s and was fully gifted both Tuan Tuan and Yuan Yuan, plus any offspring they had.
Poor little Tuan Tuan. And let's get to some more of your feedback before we head off for the evening. This person says, great outcome for the Make It 16 campaign. The age has to change. If the right-wing parties block it, it proves how disingenuous they are when they claim to represent all of New Zealand. It clearly shows they are happy to limit who can vote. Lowering the age is what's right and what is needed. That's from Shane in Hastings. Someone else says, voting at 16? No, they are not adults. Their brains are still developing. Let them be teenagers first. And Luke says, surely the Supreme Court decision should be enough. Why are we debating a Supreme Court decision on human rights? And Roth reckons, 16 and 17-year-olds have a lot more skin in the game than those over 70. It's time we introduced a maximum voting age. And Roth proposes 70. That is all we've got time for the evening. Don't forget to tune in to First Up 5 a.m. tomorrow. They will ask National's Deputy Leader, Nicola Willis, why her party won't back calls to lower the voting age to 16 despite the Supreme Court decision.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The National Party insists the voting age should stay at 18, with leader Christopher Luxon saying he's happy with the status quo. Police have left 2 houses in West Auckland and on the North Shore as the investigation into a firearms incident in Kumeu continues. 11 children from a Sydney primary school have been taken to hospital with burns after a school experiment went wrong. And it's been revealed that the embattled cryptocurrency firm